Wait, there's a meteor? Where? Oh, fuck. City Skylines has always been one of my favorites, even since its initial release back in 2015. It's a fantastic city building game and one of the best management games I've ever played. But the game is 8 years old now, and the sequel is well underway, so I think it's important to take a look back at what made City Skylines so great, and more importantly, what the sequel could do to improve. City Skylines is the gold standard for city management games. It's one of the best, offering great control, freedom, and accessibility compared to any modern game in the genre. Just the sheer amount of detail in this game is crazy. You have control over basically everything in this game, from the environment and the landmarks you put down to even what routes every single vehicle takes. Even the AI is advanced and detailed, with each citizen having their own daily routine of where they work, where they live, and what interests them. And combine all of that with the extensive community and mod support this game has, and you have a stellar, complex, and crazy good city building game. I've put over 100 hours into this game since its release. It's very replayable, especially with all the DLCs this game has had post-launch. But one of the main reasons this game succeeded as much as it did is because of the circumstances surrounding this game's release. The early 2010s were a very rough time for city management games. Pre-2013, your options were pretty bad. SimCity, one of the most prestigious city management franchises in history, had not come out with a mainline entry since SimCity 4, a game that was released in 2003. There were spin-offs and other games, but they were all so bad that I couldn't even find them in the Webster's dictionary, let alone find any information about them. And if you wanted to play something besides SimCity, well, you could, but what were you really going to play, a world of Keflings? Many other city management games were very lackluster or just didn't offer the level of polish that SimCity did, or they were just straight up bad. But then in 2013, your options got even worse, because EA came out with a game that was so bad it not only killed the studio that made it, but also killed the entire franchise. In other news, water's wet. SimCity 2013 was one of the worst city builders ever made. It was overly childish, had terrible multiplayer mechanics, incredibly small maps, and it didn't offer half the features that previous entries did. And actually, on that last point, SimCity 2013 was so bad that many people still preferred to play SimCity 4, a game that, let me remind you, was 10 years old at that point. Which is where City Skylines comes into play. It's a game that was designed to be the perfect city building game down to every little detail. And while yes, there were issues with it, it was really good, and it ended up becoming the savior of the city management genre that everyone wanted. It was that true next evolution, the next generation game that was sorely needed. But why am I talking about all this background in a game that's been out for over 8 years? Well, as Mark Twain once said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does often rhyme, and right now I'm seeing some poetry. My biggest concern for the future of City Skylines 2 is that it will go down in the same road that SimCity 2013 did, and end up being a failure because of it. Now I know that the developers for City Skylines 2, Colossal Order and Paradox, are far more competent than whatever the hell was doing, but I feel my concerns aren't entirely invalid. Which leads me to the 5 things that City Skylines 2 has to do better than City Skylines 1 in order to be the true sequel that this game deserves. And I don't mean graphics or performance, those are things that are expected to improve. I mean gameplay mechanics and core features that need to be improved in order to avoid the failures of those who came before. And speaking of which, the first thing that needs to be improved is something that plagued SimCity 2013 and is one of the main reasons why that game failed. It was too simple. SimCity 2013 focused far too much on city building and making the game easy rather than the management part, which is one of the reasons why the game felt so lifeless and uninteresting. City Skylines, on the other hand, was complicated, in-depth, and focused a lot on making sure your city could actually function over a period of time. City Skylines 2 needs to adhere to the same standard and allowing the same level, if not more, of management and customization for running your city. The main reason I bring this up is because I've already seen simplification of mechanics taking place in City Skylines 2, such as the water lines being built into roads. Seem familiar? Again, I know the developers of City Skylines are smart. In fact, I actually really like the new electricity systems. But I'm just concerned that this trend of simplifying previously established systems might continue into other areas where the simplification might harm the game's depth and playability. And speaking of playability, the second thing that City Skylines 2 has to do better than its predecessor is communication, specifically the communication of how to solve a problem in your city. Take a look at this. This building here is telling me that there aren't enough goods to sell. Now, because I've played the game for years, I know that this is because my industry buildings can't get their goods to stores, in this case due to my traffic. But did the game tell me any of this? No, I just had to figure this out from my own experience. City Skylines 2 needs to do better here, either by telling the player how to fix issues in their city, or by offering more options for players learning it themselves. Tooltips, scenarios, or even just allowing more variety in your cities are all crucial things that could fix this issue. Thirdly, and this is something that is very likely to be already implemented, but I still want to reinforce it, like the original, City Skylines 2 needs mod and community support. Like I said earlier in this video, one of the main reasons why this game is so loved even 8 years after its initial release is because of the extensive mod and community support. From maps to buildings, from roads to AI, everything in this game has mod support, and it's all fantastic. I literally can't play this game today without mods anymore, purely because of how helpful, unique, and in-depth these mods are. And while I know the game will, I still really hope that City Skylines 2 has even half the mod support that the original had. And similarly, something that is already likely to be improved but still needs to be mentioned, there is just too much reliance on cars and roads in City Skylines 1. This is especially the case when it comes to goods and services, where roads are really the only option. But this wouldn't be too much of an issue on its own if it wasn't for the fact that without mods, it would basically be impossible to make large cities. The AI, while advanced at the time, is dated by today's standards, and combined with the lacking road variety, it's just impossible not to lock up a large city. City Skylines 2 has already addressed some of these issues, especially with the AI, but I'm still worried that cargo transport and road variety may still be lacking. Road networks should not be the limiting factor for city size, especially now as maps and populations are getting bigger. And on that note, the final must for City Skylines 2 is that it needs more late game variance. While the first couple of hours of city building are great in City Skylines, once you get past around an 8K population, the game always ends up just feeling the same. The main reason I always end up with an unfinished city isn't because the game gets too hard or ends up uninteresting, it's just because it gets repetitive and I always end up doing the same thing over and over again. With City Skylines 2 allowing much bigger cities than ever before, my hope is that the game will encourage more late game progression, either by limiting unlocks until later in the game, or simply by allowing you to progress more and more as your city gets bigger and bigger. City Skylines 2 has a lot of potential, and given the fact that the original game is as good as it is, I really expect this game to be as good as it can, and we've already seen quite a few improvements. But if these 5 crucial points are not met, I do expect the game to not be as good as it could be, and it might end up even being a disappointment for some people. But if these points are met like I expect them to be, then yeah, City Skylines 2 will be better than the original. I can't wait to get my hands on what comes next for this franchise, especially with what we've seen. So with that, I think it's about time I'll take my leave. Thank you so much for watching, like and subscribe or don't, and this time I'll try not to ruin my city. Oh, not another one.